In this next video, we're going to take a look at the kingdom fungi. So fungus, here we go. The kingdom fungi comprises of a lot of various organisms, from mushrooms to molds to yeast. There's a lot of cool species here. They can either be uni or multicellular, so you have both present here in kingdom fungi. What's unique about fungi, though, is that every single organism found in this kingdom is going to have chitin found within its cell wall. Now, every fungus is heterotrophic, so you're not going to have autotrophic organisms found within this kingdom. And they are all considered saprophytes, saprobes, or decomposers, where they rely on dead, decaying organic matter to receive energy. Another unique characteristic here in this kingdom is hyphae. That's the plural form of hypha. We're going to spend some time looking at that. And there's two types of fungi that we need to know for the DAT. And that is one, unicellular fungus. This is also called non-filamentous fungus. Or the second group is multicellular fungus. This is called filamentous fungus. So if you see the words filamentous and non-filamentous, it's analogous with multicellular and unicellular fungi. It's the exact same thing. Let's look at non-filamentous fungi or unicellular fungi. It's the same thing. These are going to be yeast, so all the different types of yeasts out there. Non-filamentous fungi are facultatively anaerobic. So what does that mean again? Remember, faculty, the school faculty, they think they can do it all, right? They can live in both oxygen present and oxygen absent environments. Non-filamentous fungi reproduce by a process asexually called budding. So you can think of budding like mitosis for eukaryotic cells. The process is very similar. So when budding begins, this yeast cell is going to replicate all of its genetic information exactly. It's going to copy it so it's the exact same. Next, a new cell is going to form from this individual cell. It's going to pinch out or kind of pinch off a portion of that cytoplasm. So the cytoplasm is everything inside the cell, as well as that cell membrane to form a new cell. So with budding, you go from one cell to two exact daughter cells. Cool, now we know what non-filamentous fungi is. Let's look at filamentous fungi or multicellular fungi. We can use both terms to describe this group. Multicellular filamentous fungi are sometimes referred to as molds, but don't get that confused with slime molds. Remember, that's a fungus-like protist. That's in the kingdom Protista. We're dealing with the kingdom fungi right now, true fungus. Unlike non-filamentous fungi, filamentous multicellular fungi can also reproduce sexually. We're going to look at that later on. Filamentous fungi are also aerobic, meaning they live in the presence of oxygen and undergo aerobic metabolism. But the hallmark key feature of multicellular filamentous fungi is going to be the mycelium. The mycelium is the vegetative part of a fungus, so you can kind of think of the mycelium like roots of a tree, where the individual tree is the fungus. The mycelium is made up of a network of hyphae. So hyphae are the roots. Remember, a single hypha is plural, hypha is singular, that's going to be a single root. Hyphae are responsible for nutrient absorption, producing enzymes to absorb nutrients in the soil, as well as growing the actual mushrooms itself. So they're responsible for reproduction. Hyphae can also be referred to as filaments. That's where you get the name filamentous fungi. This fungi here has hyphae, whereas non-filamentous fungi do not have a mycelium of hyphae. Filamentous fungi is grouped based on the type of mycelium that it has, namely the type of hyphae present in that mycelium. You can either have cenocytic hyphae or septate hyphae. Those are the two groups that you need to know. The difference here is that cenocytic hyphae have no division within their hyphae itself. That division comes from cytokinesis. So cytokinesis is when you have a complete split of two daughter cells. They're completely separated from each other. We don't have that here. In fact, the whole hypha itself is connected. Because you don't have separations during cellular division, that means you have multi-nucleated hypha, or multiple nuclei within a single hypha. Septate hyphae, on the other hand, just like what the name suggests, have separations. Those separations are called septa. Septa is just the plural form for septum, which is singular. So here we have a septum, which is dividing two cells. Even though septate hyphae is distinctly separated, these septa have openings or pores, and this allows for the flow and transport of nutrients within the mycelium. You might see the word haustoria, the singular form is haustorium, and this is found in parasitic types of filamentous fungi. Haustoria just refers to a specialized type of hyphae that is used to penetrate through cell walls of organisms, which is why they're considered parasitic, because they're relying on a host for energy. Let's take a moment to look at the modes of reproduction for filamentous fungi, because filamentous multicellular fungi can undergo asexual reproduction as well as sexual reproduction. Forms of asexual reproduction include budding, like non-filamentous fungi, fragmentation, and the production of spores. We're going to look at this visually in the next slide, but just so you know, whenever a filamentous fungi undergoes asexual reproduction, it's going to be in a haploid, not a diploid, a haploid state. So spores and fragmentation are both a type of asexual reproduction. Spores are released externally into the environment, and that's where you're relying on wind or water to carry these spores. These spores are eventually going to germinate and form a mycelium. Fragmentation, on the other hand, just like what the name suggests, involves fragments. This is breaking up of hyphae. Now, each individual piece, each component, can grow into a separate mycelium individually. So in other words, each fragment can grow into a completely new colony with fragmentation. Alright, cool. Now we get to sexual reproduction of filamentous fungi. So why do organisms reproduce sexually? Well, it's because of genetic variation, right? You want your next generation to be at a higher fitness level. We're going to look at this in the next slide, but sexual reproduction involves two unique individuals and not just one, like asexual reproduction. Here's a few terms you might see involving sexual reproduction of filamentous fungi. Number one is plasmogamy. This is when you have two different fungi, so unique individuals here. They're going to have their hyphae grow towards each other and fuse. Their cytoplasms of their hyphae are going to fuse. So plasmogamy has the root plasmo in it. Same with cytoplasm, has that root plasm in it. So we're dealing with a cell. So this is a cellular process of two cells fusing together. Karyogamy, on the other hand, refers to a process after plasmogamy. So this is after two cells have fused their cytoplasms together. Karyogamy is when their nuclei are going to fuse together. When this occurs, that organism now is going to be considered diploid, because both of those parents that fuse together, that come together with their hyphae, are haploid. They're both 1N. Now this offspring is genetically different. It's diverse, right? It's diploid. It's 2N. And that's due to karyogamy and the fusion of two nuclei. We'll say this diploid individual now grows up and it wants to reproduce. It needs to undergo meiosis. So it goes from a diploid state of 2N down to a haploid state of 1N. So it's going to produce haploid spores through meiosis, and those spores are going to grow into a new organism, a new colony of hyphae. You might be a little confused. No worries. We're going to look at this visually in the next slide. All right, here we have the life cycle of filamentous fungi. So right here in the middle, we have a mycelium. Now, what type of mycelium is this? Well, there's separations here. We have septa, so this is septate hyphae. Filamentous fungi can undergo asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction, which involves another individual. Let's take a look at asexual reproduction. Remember, asexual reproduction for filamentous fungi is always going to be in a haploid or a 1N state. Here at the top half of the diagram, we have the 1N mycelium producing spores through mitosis. These spores, just like the mycelium, are also 1N. They're haploid. Asexual reproduction for mycelium can also undergo budding or fragmentation, but the process is the exact same. You're going to have spores or fragments that undergo germination to form another mycelium, which is also haploid, 1N. And this process is going to continue throughout time. This is asexual reproduction, so each individual mycelium will continue to undergo asexual reproduction to produce more mycelium. The thing here, though, with asexual reproduction is there's no genetic variation, so each daughter mycelium is going to be the exact same. Now let's take a look at sexual reproduction on the bottom half of the diagram. Our 1N mycelium is going to grow towards another mycelium and fuse their cytoplasms through a process known as plasmogamy. When I say other mycelium, I'm referring to another individual, so we're talking about another fungus here. So we have two fungi that are reproducing. After plasmogamy, a process known as karyogamy is going to occur, and that's the fusion of both nuclei from two funguses. This is going to make a zygote that's diploid, so it's 2N. So both of those hyphae coming together were 1N, they're haploid, and now we have a zygote that's diploid, 2N. which means that when this zygote wants to reproduce, it has to lose that 2n number and go down to 1n. It has to become haploid. So that's going to occur through the formation of spores through meiosis. So not mitosis here, meiosis. Those spores are going to germinate into another mycelium, a haploid mycelium, which is where we started. That mycelium can then undergo asexual reproduction or sexual reproduction, and the process begins again. Finishing up with fungi, here's some random things that you should know for the DAT. If you ever encounter a word that ends in the suffix macata, then you're dealing with one of the 5 phyla of fungi. So zygomacata, deuteromacata, those are just groups of fungi. You don't really need to know the specifics, just know that you're dealing with fungus here. Lichens are super important, and you should definitely know what they are. That's a mutual realistic relationship of fungi and algae together. So the algae is going to provide the carbohydrates through photosynthesis. Sometimes that algae can be cyanobacteria as well. And then the fungus is contributing to this relationship by providing protection. So they're both mutualistically benefiting from each other. Another group that you should know is mycorrhiza. So there's that root again, myco meaning fungi. This is a fungus that grows in association with roots of a plant, and that's considered a mutualistic symbiotic relationship. Moving along, we're halfway there. So we finished up kingdom Protista and fungi. Now we're going to look at plants, kingdom Plantae.